What if I told you the most infamous dictator of the 20th century, Joseph Stalin, wasn't actually named Stalin? His real name, Iosif Dzhugashvili, is virtually unknown today. But the story of why he abandoned his birthright for a terrifying pseudonym, and how a failed priest from a struggling shoe factory became the Man of Steel, is far more shocking than you imagine. Most people assume he was a Russian giant from birth, but the truth is he wasn't even Russian. He was Georgian, born in the small town of Gori. The name Stalin was a carefully crafted mask, a revolutionary brand he didn't even adopt until he was 35 years old. To understand a man who would eventually hold the world in a grip of iron, we have to look past the propaganda and the mustache to find the young boy named Iosif, whose life was defined by broken dreams and a desperate need for a new identity. Long before he was a dictator, Iosif Dzhugashvili was the son of a local cobbler. His father actually ran a modest shoe factory with 10 employees, and for a while, life was comfortable. In a time of scarcity, young Iosif grew up eating butter with every meal, a true sign of wealth in 19th century Georgia. But the comfort didn't last. The business collapsed due to poor management, and his father spiraled into alcoholism. The household became a place of violence, where Iosif and his mother suffered regular beatings. Seeking a way out, his mother pushed him toward the church, hoping he would become a priest. Iosif was actually a brilliant student, securing a scholarship that covered his room and board. However, the path to the priesthood ended abruptly in 1899. When tuition fees suddenly spiked, he couldn't pay the bill and was expelled. At 20 years old, the man who was supposed to serve God found himself working as a weather observer at a meteorological station, his faith replaced by a growing anger toward the system. After leaving the church, Iosif dove headfirst into the radical underground. He joined the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party and became a key figure in the 1900 railway strikes. When the party split in 1903, he chose the side of the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin. The two finally met in 1905 at a secret conference in Finland, where Lenin argued that the Tsar could only be overthrown by force. This meeting changed everything. Iosif became a ghost, constantly hunted by the Tsar's secret police. He was exiled to Siberia in 1909, escaped and returned. He was exiled again in 1910, and again he returned, even sneaking into the capital, Petrograd, right under the noses of the authorities. It was during this period of high-stakes rebellion that he needed a name that commanded respect and fear. While writing articles for the revolutionary newspaper Pravda, he chose a pen name that reflected his hardened resolve. He signed his work as Stalin, derived from the Russian word for steel. It wasn't just a nickname, it was a declaration of his new, unbreakable persona. The transition from Iosif Dzhugashvili to Joseph Stalin was more than just a name change. It was a total erasure of his past. By the time the Russian Revolution shook the world, the Georgian cobbler's son had effectively vanished. The name Stalin became a symbol of the relentless, cold efficiency required to lead a superpower. He stopped being a man and became an institution. Even today, historians like Stephen Kotkin emphasize that understanding his Georgian roots is the only way to decode his later paranoia and drive for absolute control. The pseudonym worked so well that most people today don't even realize Stalin wasn't his real name, proving that in the game of power, your identity is whatever you have the strength to forge. To truly understand why Iosif Dzhugashvili became Stalin, we have to look at the psychological utility of a pseudonym in the brutal world of early 20th century espionage. In the underground circles of the Bolsheviks, names were weapons and shields. By shedding Dzhugashvili, he wasn't just hiding from the Tsarist police. He was killing the vulnerable Georgian boy who had been beaten by his father and rejected by the church. The name, Stalin, acted as a psychological armor that allowed him to commit acts of extreme ruthlessness without the weight of his past identity. In the revolutionary cells of Tbilisi and Baku, he was known by many aliases: Koba, Besishvili, Ivanov. But Stalin was the only one that stuck, because it perfectly captured the industrial, cold, and unyielding future he envisioned for the Soviet Union. This wasn't just a Reddit handle for a revolutionary. It was a total rebranding of a human soul. By the time he reached the inner circle of Lenin's government, the transition was so complete that even his closest associates rarely used his birth name. He had successfully convinced the world, and perhaps even himself, that he was made of metal rather than flesh and blood. This calculated shift in identity allowed him to distance himself from his Georgian heritage when it was politically convenient, presenting himself instead as the ultimate, unified symbol of Soviet power. He understood better than anyone that while a man can be broken, a legend made of steel is immortal. This mastery of image and identity is what allowed a failed priest to eventually command the largest army on Earth, proving that the most powerful weapon in his arsenal wasn't a gun, but the name he chose for himself. The transformation of Iosif Dzhugashvili into Joseph Stalin shows how a single choice of identity can change the course of global history. He wasn't born a monster. He was forged by failure, violence, and a revolutionary fire that burned away his original self. If you found this deep dive into the origins of the Man of Steel fascinating, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment below about which historical figure we should unmask next.